Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, June 18th, 2013. Got a lot of stuff to talk about today. All kinds of stories are breaking all over the place. Manny is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer your calls when you call on in. The phone lines are open. 800-313-9443. 800-313-9443. Obviously, the big story continues to be this blanket surveillance spying on all Americans, your phone calls, your emails, your texts, your download history, your online purchases. Everything is being snarfed up by these giant data centers the NSA has been building with your tax dollars at a time where they don't seem all that interested in repairing the roads, fixing the bridges, keeping the schools, giving quality education. It is just a complete using your money to entrap you, to control you, to keep you a slave. Of course, that's not what General Hayden is saying. He's out there, saying that the spying programs keep you all free. We keep you free. That's why we're the good guys. And apparently he was over at Newsmax making this ludicrous comment. All nations spy. That part is true. The Chinese conduct espionage. Got to get that hit on China in. China's on the special high-interest targets list of the U.S. government. And he goes on to say, yeah, the NSA is pretty good at it. But we, the good guys, the United States, we spy on everybody to keep you safe and keep you free. The Chinese spy to make their citizens rich. And there's the difference. The Chinese do these things for commercial advantage. We do not. Well, somebody needs to brief this moron on the Seattle Apex scandal in which the U.S. intelligence agencies, the NSA among them, were caught stealing business secrets from conference attendees to hand to Clinton cronies. Hayden is basically going back to everybody does it. Yes, you caught me with a marijuana cigarette, Mommy, but all the kids at school are smoking it. And then he falls back on this thing, but yeah, we're all doing it, but we do it for good intentions, and they do it for bad intentions. And that's nonsense. Anybody spying is doing it for bad intentions. And they're having their hearing before Congress. It's being televised. And the NSA is out there saying, well, we stopped all these terror attacks here, and we've stopped, and the number keeps growing. Last week it was, we've foiled at least a dozen terror attacks. Now it's up to 50. Next week it'll be up to 5,000. And they don't want to reveal details, of course, because that would violate our security, our methods. Well, we know the methods. They're watching everything that you do. That's their method. Total information awareness, they used to call it. Till the public got angry about that and they rebranded. Kept on doing the same thing. They just changed the names and hope you would not notice here. And they continue to focus on this thwarted subway bombing in Great Britain involving a gentleman named Zassi and how the NSA found him and discovered it and uncovered the plot. And, of course, the British authorities are saying exactly the opposite, which is that, no, the NSA had nothing to do with it. Ordinary, regular police work stopped this. And, of course, in this list of 50 thwarted terror attacks, what we don't know is how many of them were those FBI entrapment operations where the FBI informants set up the terror plot and they get the materials and the money and then they sucker some patsies into going along with it, then swoop in for the arrest and get the headlines. And then 6 months later, the courts throw it out as an obvious entrapment, but by that time the propaganda agenda has been served. And so at this point, yeah, of course they're lying. Of course they're lying out there, and we're there to save the world from terrorism, which tell that to the people in Boston, how well that works. When we come back, more about how to stop terrorism if they really wanted terrorism to go away. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And, of course, the NSA is trying to justify everything they have done to the American people, all of these constitutional violations. It's necessary to save you from acts of terror. Well, obviously, what happened in Boston proves it does not work. And now they're having to go back and say, oh, yeah, it's worked. We saved you from terror. We didn't tell you when it was happening, but we're going to tell you now. NSA stands for now saving ass, because that's what they're trying to do here. That's if you buy the official story of Boston, and I don't. because this rush to the Orwellian superstate needs terrorism. This government needs there to be terrorism. That's why I have all these phonies running around like Adam Gadon, whose real name is Adam Perlman, and Yusuf al-Khattab, whose real name is Joseph Cohen. They need terrorism to sell you this idea that you have to give up your constitutional rights and we have to make war on all those gosh darn Arab Muslims who are living all over that oil that the imaginary playmate in the sky said should belong to America and, of course, to Israel. They need terrorism out there. If they wanted to stop terrorism, they could in a heartbeat. Do you think somebody gets up one morning and says, boy, there's nothing on TV today. I think I'll go and blow up a school bus and hope I don't burn my lips on the exhaust pipe? Terrorism or unconventional warfare is something that comes about when you're in other people's countries blowing their citizens up and stealing their wealth. So stopping terrorism is easy, could be done overnight. Just quit screwing around with other people's countries, and the terrorists will go home and get jobs and go back to normal life. But the government of the United States, prodded by the money junkies, who want their global fascist private central banking scheme, the U.S. is going to go on screwing around with other people's countries, refuses to stop, cloaks it with words like manifest destiny, for the, that says the United States government has some kind of a right to screw around with every other person's countries on planet Earth, and the U.S. government views all that inconvenience, the increased tax burden, the loss of civil liberties, deaths among the American people, not to mention the deaths around the globe, and even the risk of global nuclear war. It's just a cost of doing business to get that private central banking model established as the global standard. You can stop terrorism. Stop bombing other countries. And the terrorists don't have a reason to terror. It is nonsense to say they're committing acts of terror because they hate our freedoms. Our freedoms are pretty much gone. Our freedom to have our lives private, mind our own businesses, and the freedom to be left alone are gone. You're taking away your right to keep and bear arms, your freedom to defend your home against rampaging criminals in a country where the police are too busy clubbing protesters to be bothered with things like robbery, rape, burglary, home invasion, carjacking. And most of all, we've lost the freedom to say no. And there's the difference between a slave population and a free population. Free population can say no to the government. No, we don't want Obamacare. No, we don't want our guns taken away. No, we don't want our sons and daughters sent to foreign countries in wars of conquest to make the 1% that much richer. Slave societies can't say no. Or they can say it and the government will just say, you are so cute out there trying to say no to us. Go back to your surf pen. So basically that's what it comes down to. We've lost most of those freedoms, we are told, are the reason for these terror attacks. And by the way, common sense tells you, nobody hates freedom except authority figures, the sociopaths. The people of Iran don't hate us for our freedoms. The people of Iran love freedom. They want freedom. People around the world, everybody wants to be free. It is only those authority figures, governments, tyrants, clergy, that demand you give up your freedoms and do as you are told. Hate the Muslims, hate the gays, hate this, hate that. To direct you to do something that increases their profit and control around the world. So the NSA is out there, and they're just scrambling, trying to contain the damage from the revelations. We were reporting yesterday the poll numbers. Even the corporate media is having to sort of admit grudgingly, yeah, the American people are kind of pissed off about this. So the NSA director is out there saying, well, we work with the FISA court, the Foreign Intelligence Service Agency, and they're not a rubber stamp. Yeah, they are. In their entire history, they've only refused a request for surveillance, I think, once or twice. And probably they did that just so they could say, see, we're not always approving all of them. We refused these two over here. And yes, we signed off on these several thousand, tens of thousands over here. But we did say no this time. We did say no. Obama's out there defending the NSA spying, saying it's a good thing. And you need to remember, FISA, F-I-S-A, the Foreign Intelligence Security Act. The legal jurisdiction for that court is outside the United States of America, where the Bill of Rights does not apply. They have no jurisdiction under their original legislation. They have no jurisdiction to spy here in the United States of America on law-abiding citizens who are not engaged in any crimes. They don't, but they are. They absolutely are. And their public statements today about needing court orders and the rest of it are directly contradicted by statements that were made in these congressional briefings, which were then leaked out. And don't forget, speaking of the Boston bombing, following that, when they were putting the blame on the Tsarnaev brothers, an FBI spokesman said right on the corporate media, yeah, we save all the phone calls in America so we can go back and listen to them whenever we want to. So now they're trying to bamboozle you again and say, it's really no big deal, and anybody who makes a big deal about being spied on is going to help the terrorists win. Now, of course, Dick Cheney is out there trying to support all this stuff, saying that if warrantless domestic surveillance had been around, we could have prevented 9/11. And, of course, the problem with that is records have now surfaced showing that this surveillance was going on before 9/11. Didn't work there, if you believe the official story of 9/11, and I don't. They needed that new Pearl Harbor, the project for the new American century. When in their policy paper, Rebuilding America's Defenses, they said right in there that absent a new Pearl Harbor, their agenda was going to take decades to complete. They needed a new Pearl Harbor, and by golly, thanks to Tim Osman, they got one. Tim Osman was Osama bin Laden's code name when he worked for CIA in Afghanistan. Not that bin Laden had anything to do with it. He just stood up to be the public relations front, the cardboard cutout. Hi, I'm a bad little Muslim terrorist. Come get me. And then he died in December. So the NSA is out there now saying, yes, that all this spying does have a good purpose, because after all, well, you know, they defeated Lex Luthor and the Joker and Magneto. They got Dr. Doom and the Red Skull because, hey, you haven't seen them around in real life in a while, right? So the NSA is taking credit for that. All righty, let's see. We're going to take a phone call. Don in Ohio. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, yeah, talking about security and software. There's so many free different things, you know, that you can get out there today, you know, clean your computer up, firewalls and everything else. You know, and most people don't know where most of these programs actually originate from or who buys them out. Like, what I understand is Zone Alarm is got a Israeli partnership where it sends, you know, it basically calls home to Israel. It's called Checkpoint.
I was familiar with the Zone Alarm. Norton, remember, Norton used to be a really good security system. They got bought out by an Israeli company, and not only did the quality of the product go right down into the basement, but immediately computer security experts were pointing out it was actually opening up more holes into your computer than just leaving the computer there without the Norton.
That's also with a company called iObit. I used to use it, Advanced System Cleaner or something like that. They're, I guess, Red Chinese, and I guess they recently got caught stealing the code for malware bytes. So, you know.
Well, you know, there's a lot of that stuff going on here, but the reason it's so easy for these companies to do that are the back doors built into the operating systems themselves. You know, we now know that virtually every Windows machine, and we can safely assume every Apple machine, every Macintosh, going back to, well, a decade, has had a back door put in it. And it's kind of funny. Before the show, I was out there looking for a tool to remove the NSA key, because I remember there was one once, back in the days of Windows 2000 and NT. Somebody had actually put out a tool where you could go in and simply write over the NSA key in the Microsoft encryption system. Unfortunately, the web search engines aren't finding that anymore. It's disappeared, and the version that was released back then doesn't work for the new operating systems. But I have no doubt that, you know, computer security experts are already digging in there to find these keys and put out little tools that will simply overwrite them with junk in order to shut those back doors. But those back doors are there that, you know, not just for the U.S. government to use them. These foreign governments, especially Israel, can use them. Everybody can use them. The privacy of computer users around the world is a complete illusion. Your entire online life is an open book to them, and they don't have the right to do that under the Constitution.
I'd suggest anybody that is concerned about their security, that you don't have to pay for it. Go to Kaspersky Labs, and you can basically download a little program that will scan your computer on top of your antivirus also. And that'll give you a bunch of clues on what.
Well, the problem with that is we know from the McAfee people a while back, these computer security software companies deliberately make sure their software doesn't find the government malware. So that's not necessarily a solution. When we come back, a couple of ideas. And aloha, America. Welcome back to your show. And obviously, a lot of people right now are very concerned about their privacy. And if you have something you don't want the government looking at, like your business product development that you don't want them running off and buying stock in your company so they can make money off of your work, if you have data that is the proprietary property of your clients, that was a big concern for me. Every time I had to go through an airport with a laptop, I had images and videos that were the proprietary property of ABC Television and other clients. And the last thing I needed was for some TSA worker to say, oh, here's a behind-the-scenes picture from the production of Lost, and I've got a friend who's got a blog, and he'll pay me money for this. It's a huge problem out there. We do have a right for privacy and a necessity in the hands of a government that has absolutely no respect for the American people and their property, and they'll just, oh, I can use this, and they'll take it, and they're off and running. I've lost count of the number of government agents caught doing insider trading with information that they glean from your private intellectual property. It's the Apex scandal. It's just, again, tip of the iceberg. I know that's an overused phrase right now, but it's absolutely true. The government has created for itself a system where government people can simply pillage your ideas, your property, your copyrighted property, stuff that's in your care that cannot be allowed out. And they don't care if you get fired because a picture left in your care by a client was leaked onto the net ahead of time. They don't care. They absolutely don't care. It's a small price to pay for national security. So, with all this talk about backdoors that are inside there, obviously having a computer that is not connected to the net, where if you need to move files across, you use a jump disk, shut off the Wi-Fi, pull out the cable. Doesn't matter what backdoors they have in your computer. If it's unplugged from the wall, they can't reach it. Anything that is critical that you don't want vanishing mysteriously in the middle of the night. Oh, gee, wow, that file was there last night. Where did it go? You put it on a separate drive on a USB port and you unplug it and keep it in a firebox. That's where you keep your final backups. And as I've mentioned before, if you need to transmit information securely over the net, you need to develop your own codes and encryption. And it's not that difficult. It's not that difficult. Remember, for the NSA to read your traffic that's encrypted, it's a two-step process. Finding the method, then finding the keys. Finding the method is the hard part. They couldn't break Enigma until they actually captured a physical machine. So all you have to do is write your own little encryption. It doesn't even have to be all that strong or all that sophisticated. Just some out-of-the-box idea in a completely different direction from the nested S&P boxes that comprise most of the modern codes. And if you have your own method and your own keys, it's going to be a lot more work for the NSA to get in there. And if millions of Americans have their own codes and encryptions to keep their business secrets private, to keep their collection of bikini photos private from the NSA, to keep pictures of their significant others and kinky poses private, which we all have a right to do that under the Fourth Amendment. If you've got a million different code systems out there, it seriously compromises the NSA's ability to spy on you. They want you to use the off-the-shelf encryption because they already know the method. They want you to use DES with its work reduction packet. They wanted you to use Clipper with its leaf packet, which basically handed them your encryption key. They want you to use PGP. They want you to use stuff that they already know the method to because then finding the keys is easy. So if you really have something that you need to hide, you need to come up with your own encryption, and it's not that difficult. And by the way, this whole idea that spying on Americans is going to stop criminals and terrorists, of course not. They've known for decades not to trust the Internet and not to trust any off-the-shelf encryption. They've come up with their own. They're using one-time pads. That's an unbreakable system of sending messages. They're using the number stations. This NSA spying is all about keeping the American people under control. And now they're trying to back off and say, well, really, we're only looking at the bad people, so you shouldn't kick up a fuss. Yeah, we should. So, anyway, let's see. Story out of Activist Post, government twisting the facts on NSA targeting Americans. And, the NSA is getting into weasel wording, and they're trying to say, oh, we're not really, we're just saving all the data, but most of it's ignored. And that's probably true, but there's a principle here. Grabbing that data, whether anybody looks at it or not, is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Now, the latest spin we're getting out of here is the head of the NSA has demanded that Congress pass a law offering blanket immunity for all companies that help the NSA spy on the American people. This, of course, is instantly unconstitutional. Congress can't pass a law saying it's okay to violate the Bill of Rights. Under the United States Supreme Court ruling, Marbury versus Madison, such a law, repugnant to the Constitution, is instantly null and void. They're worried about all these massive class action lawsuits that are going to be targeting these companies that sold out to the NSA. And they should be. And we should sue them. And we should put them out of business. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And a bit of a program note. Yesterday we were trying to connect with Paul from the band Poker Face regarding Freedom Palooza. We're going to try and connect with him in hour number 3 again today, and hopefully it'll go through smoothly. I'm looking over here at the corporate media, and they're going on about, oh, how terrible the credibility crisis the White House is facing, and the polls are showing that the majority of Americans actually don't trust the President of the United States of America. Our own poll came up with well over 90% saying, no, we don't trust this guy. Best reason not to trust the President? He's the President. Best reason not to trust the government? It is the government right now. All right, we're going to grab some phone calls here. The phone lines are loading up. Danielle in Idaho. Aloha, Danielle. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, how are you today?
Biodegradable.
Well, I just want to say that, I really do appreciate you getting the word out there. And since me and my husband became informed, we've been trying to spread the word as much as possible, signs, billboards, stickers, whatever we can do. Even posting up, stuff off of your website, printing it out, paying the money to print it out, and just putting it on boards at stores, supermarkets, whatever. Since we've been doing that, we've lost jobs from it. We have definitely been having our phones listened to. We've been having our emails listened, just everything.
Yeah, well, that's a given right now in the United States for pretty much everybody. And, I understand, it is a reality. When you speak truth to power, bad things will happen to you. I went through that 20 years ago when I had my career in Hollywood absolutely destroyed for trying to report what, the evidence I found that White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster had, in fact, been murdered. And the FBI was complicit in the cover-up of trying to say, oh, it's just a suicide, nothing to see here. And, yeah, it absolutely brought my career to an abrupt halt. We saw the FBI do the same thing to a very well-known actress, Jean Seberg, back in the 1960s as part of Operation COINTELPRO, because she dared stand up there and say, the civil rights movement have some legitimate grievances going on. And this is a reality, and anybody who's out here in the independent media, anybody who's out here in the blogs, anybody who's out here trying to get the truth out about what's going on in this country, yeah, you are going to be targeted. And, for the vast majority of us, it's something we understand as a reality of life in the United States of America. The Gestapo's going to come for you and cause as much trouble as they can. When we were living here in Hawaii, back when we were still doing TV and radio advertising for the local market, we had somebody literally from Israel call up every ad agency in town and say, don't you dare give this person business. They're a threat to Israel's, whatever it is Israel was up to at the time. So, yeah, these things do happen, and it's a reality of life. And, I don't make a big deal about it, but everybody who's involved in getting the truth out knows this is what's going to happen. The other side loves to play dirty. They think it's their divine right to lie, cheat, steal, and kill, and that this is what makes them superior human beings. But, of course, we know better. It just makes them human beings willing to lie, cheat, steal, and kill to get what they want.
It's just scary. You know, we have kids, and it's starting to get to a point where, you know, I'm not able to support our children because of what's going on. Also, my family has noted that when I call them, my calls show up on their caller ID as call forwarded, which is weird.
That does sound very weird indeed, and probably along with the revelation of NSA spying, we're probably going to see lots of little hints and overt messages out there. We're watching you, you know, this whole, they're trying to scare you. They're trying to scare you. And I understand if you've got kids that you got to pull back. You know, you do have to take care of your family, and I understand that very, very much so. But it is. We live in a country right now where the government has completely abandoned the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and their complete political philosophy is anything that gets us what we want is okay. And again, we used to have, well, we still do. We have this coffee cup you can buy from our online store that says the fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force them to act like one where everybody can see it. And now, obviously, the U.S. government stands exposed as this complete tyranny that spies on us, doesn't trust us, gropes us at the airports, steals our emails and our private documents for their own personal profit, and the American people are waking up to that. That's why the poll numbers are really so bad right now for Congress and the White House and for the NSA. And all these people know how to do is go on trying to lie and say, oh, it's no big deal if you're a loyal American, you'll go along with this. And they're coming up empty, because they're still trying to play this game by the rules that worked at the height of the Cold War half a century ago, and it just doesn't work any longer, and they still don't get it. They understand that a free and open mass media at the consumer level, which is what the Internet is, does pose a threat to their power and authority, because they can no longer lie to us with impunity, and they're trying to figure out some way they can convince the American people that it's got to be taken under control, and the government has to decide what's allowed on the Internet and not, just like they did radio and television and newspapers. And the American people aren't going for it.
These people are believing them. These people are believing them. I mean, with the people we try to talk to about it, they're just so dumb. I mean, it's insane. They actually believe that this is a good thing. Even if you show them proof, they're like, oh, well, there must be a reason behind it, you know, just hope
well,
for the
you know,
best.
there's a lot of Americans who are still in denial, and the reason for that is very simple. We've all been raised to envision ourselves as just and moral people. We watch films and TVs about, you know, individuals who stand up against corruption, and we like to believe that we would do the same. But when confronted with the reality of a government gone rogue, most people don't want to look at that, because as you yourself just illustrated, to take a stand against a government that's gone rogue entails risks to your income, to your personal safety, to your standard of living. But most people, you know, they don't want to make that choice of knowing the government is wrong and deciding not to do anything about it. Then they have to surrender their self-image of being a good human being. And so these people will gratefully accept any piece of propaganda put out by the government, no matter how absurd it is, so they can go on saying, I'm a just and moral human being and I would fight against government wrongdoing. I just don't see a reason to do it right now. But thankfully, that percentage of the population is rapidly, rapidly shrinking. And what you need to do is don't waste time with people who are so caught up in their beliefs that they're just not going to listen. Find the people who are starting to ask the important questions and invest your time with them to educate them. And don't forget, right now there's a lot of people out here in our society, online especially, who are paid to argue endlessly with people over these various issues. And, why justify their salaries? Again, ignore the people who are out there saying the government is good, the government is great, their feces are not odoriferous, and ignore them. Step around them. They're probably all working for COINTELPRO or its current update anyway. Find the people who are honestly asking new questions and educate them. Don't get suckered into pointless arguments. We used to see this online all the time where, we'd be arguing points about, we'll go back to the Vince Foster murder. And you'd go down the points one by one by one by one about why it was obviously a murder made to look like a suicide, and then the shill who was trying to say, oh, you're nonsense, you're kooks, you're wearing tinfoil, would go away. And then immediately a whole new poster with a new identity would show up to start arguing the same points all over again, and you could tell from the writing it was the same person. We know the government hires thousands and thousands of people to sit on the internet to waste everybody's time in arguing about things. And they're not interested in the truth, and they're not interested in the fact. They're getting a paycheck to waste everybody's time and delay the formation of a popular consensus. And again, it's not. You've seen all these ads. Make money from your home on the computer. That's where they're getting these people. People are so desperate for job that they will go out and be paid propagandists for the government and, you know, make their little bit of minimum wage, and then late at night they abuse themselves watching old James Bond movies and think they're doing something good for the world. Danielle, did I talk you to death?
No, I totally agree with you, and I just, you know, I really do appreciate all the work that you're doing out there. If you have, like, any stickers or anything you want to send my way, just let me know.
Well, you know, we do have an online store which has coffee mugs and T-shirts and some stickers, and of course Republic Broadcasting also has their online store where you can get items like that. And we don't have a huge markup on that stuff, but obviously any time that you buy something from the online store, it does help us keep our operation going here. So Danielle, thank you very much. I hear a small person in the background calling for your attention. We're going to let you go and switch over to Ryan in Texas. Aloha, Ryan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Thanks for having me on your program. I woke up about a year ago to all of this mess, and as far as I figured, the train has already left the station, and I've just jumped onto the rear car. I'm not going to say that I'm naive, but I don't know everything that there is to know about international politics. But this story that I heard on a separate program today kind of made me confused. I don't know what's going on here. Press TV reports that the United States has deployed 1,500 Marines to Yemen, of all places. And I was wondering if you would know why would we be sending Marines to Yemen?
Well, it may well be because Yemen is starting to look like their people are getting ready to kick their government out. And the U.S. agenda is really very simple. You know, overthrow the evil, cruel tyrants who don't do what the U.S. says, and support the evil, cruel tyrants who do what the U.S. says. And once you understand that that's the agenda, then Libya makes sense, Syria makes sense, Qatar makes sense, all of these places make sense. It's all about global domination to force the world back to Bretton Woods. That's the real ultimate U.S. agenda, is to force the world back onto Bretton Woods, where the U.S. paper dollar is the unchallenged, unquestioned global trade currency, and everybody has to go through the dollar to conduct international trade, from which the U.S. gets a piece of the action. But the world doesn't want to go back to Bretton Woods because of how the U.S. abused it in the past, up to the point where Nixon had to end gold convertibility because the Federal Reserve was just printing these paper notes and sending them all over the world. And these other countries were bound by Bretton Woods to send back manufactured goods and agricultural produce at full face value for this ink and paper. And then it all fell apart when Nixon ended gold convertibility, so they switched to this petrodollar scam of making sure that the world's natural resources, primarily oil, were only available on the market for U.S. dollars. That's starting to fall apart. Started to fall apart in 2002. When Iraq got permission from the UN to sell their oil for the euro. 1 year later, the U.S. invades. Iraq's oil is back on the world market, but only for the U.S. dollar. That's a major reason for the war into Iran, to force Iran to sell their oil only for U.S. dollars and to accept a private central bank. Ryan, you still there?
Yes, I'm still here, although I don't want to waste any more of the precious time that we have left until this whole shebang comes crumbling down, so I'm going to let you go.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Kent in West Virginia. Aloha, Kent. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
You had worked for ABC. I was wondering how difficult is it to get a clip, let's say, from, say, an old Peter Jennings ABC Evening News program. Is that readily available, or is it difficult to get that stuff?
Well, the easy way, of course, is if such a clip is out on the Internet and you search for it on any of the video servers like YouTube. If it's something that ABC does not want to have made public, if you're a media organization, you can go to them and you can license the footage from their library. But, of course, if it's something particularly embarrassing, they'll simply say not available for licensing. Or in the case of BBC and their footage of their reporter reporting on the World Trade Center 7 collapsing 20 minutes before it actually happened, they throw up their hands and say, "We just threw all that footage away, really."
Okay, so I've got a very interesting video clipping on December 11th, which was 3 months after 9/11. You know, I was happened to be watching the shows in the morning. And George Bush gave an address to the American people about 9/11, and he was standing in front of the Israeli flag. There was no American flag, and I was absolutely astonished by it. And of course, I live in West Virginia at the time. There was no digital TV, and I did get it captured on, pretty poor television reception.
Yeah.
And I've often died about getting an actual copy. And I actually had somebody interested in putting it on their website, and they went looking down in Washington, and they couldn't find it. And, of course, I said, well, why don't you get it from the network? He said, well, they won't give it to us, so maybe. Well,
if it's embarrassing, he's absolutely right. But, if you look at the annual AIPAC conference in Washington, D.C., where all of America's politicians line up and swear fealty to Almighty Israel, you will find a lot of videos of various politicians standing in front of the flag of Israel. Proclaiming their loyalty to the global domination of the private central bankers. And you can go out on Google, for example, in the images section, and you can simply put in Bush in front of Israeli flag, or Obama in front of Israeli flag, or Bush AIPAC, Obama AIPAC, and you'll find all this stuff is out there. They're not really trying to hide that. They're trying to get everybody sort of slowly used to the idea that Israel has subverted the entire U.S. government, and you might as well just get used to it. It's like
well, this was from the actual this was from the White House.
Yeah,
from the press room in the White House, and it was set up and organized so that it was when it was camera focused in on him, it was as if he was standing in front of the Israeli flag, talking to the American people on behalf of the Israeli government from the White House.
Yeah, I would imagine that's probably out there to be found somewhere because it happens so often, it's just not that big a deal. Remember what Ariel Sharon said to Shimon Peres? This was reported in Kol Yisrael Radio, where he said, don't talk to me about America will do this and America do that. We, the Jewish people, control America, and the Americans know it. And yeah, every time there's another AIPAC conference and they set up the stage and you see America's politicians, including the president, grovel to Israel's influence, it becomes more and more obvious. We've been subverted. We've been subverted by a foreign power. I remember when I was growing up in the school and we had all these film strips and movies about beware of communist subversion. The Soviet Union wants to subvert our government. It turns out all that time we were looking in the wrong direction. We were being subverted. It just wasn't the Soviet Union that was doing it.
Right. So, I just always thought, anytime you see these politicians, even the local dog catcher here in West Virginia, it's like Stagecraft 101, the American flag, and I was just quite shocked by it,
No, we do see it a lot. We do see it a lot. Yeah, and again, you can go do a Google search for some politician in front of Israel flag, or just politician Israel or politician AIPAC. You'll find it all over the place. And in the end, Israel's arrogance is its own downfall because they can't resist bragging when they've got your country by the throat. And ultimately, it leads to backlashes. And then they scream anti-Semitism and you love Hitler, and we're off and running on the cycle again. Thank you for the call, Kent. Going to let you go back in just a few minutes. Alrighty, so welcome back to the show, and we're going to go back to the NSA snooping. This is the absolute incontrovertible proof that the United States government has decided they don't have to obey the rules anymore. Constitution, just a blankety-blank piece of paper. Bill of Rights, it's just getting in the way of our plan for world conquest and the establishment of a global private central bank to permanently enslave all of humankind in artificially created debt. And it works only as long as you believe that this is the way it's supposed to be. As I've said before, rule by debt is no more legitimate a form of governance than rule by divine right or rule by slavery. We know those former systems of rulership were complete bogus. They were frauds. They only worked because people believed this was the way it was supposed to be. People believed the kings were chosen by the imaginary playmate in the sky to tell everybody else what to do, including Richard III. Slavery only works if you believe it's possible for one person to own another person. And we know that's complete nonsense. And so rule by compound interest, allowing private bankers to run a nation's economy, is also illegitimate. And the world is waking up to that. And that's why they're scared, and that's why they've hit pedal to the metal. They're trying to get this thing going as fast as they can. Anyway, over at Blacklisted News, they have a list of 21 facts about NSA snooping every American should know. And it basically is a collection of all the statements that have already come out that directly contradict the NSA statements to Congress under oath right now today. Over at CNET, the NSA told Congress during a recent classified briefing, it does not need a court order to listen to your phone calls. And that means they're being saved. And as I mentioned before, in the aftermath of the Boston bombing, the FBI's representative, counterterrorism expert, came out and said right on CNN, yeah, we're recording everything. In fact, here's a direct quote from this guy. This was former FBI counterterrorism agent Tim Clemente, said right on CNN, welcome to America. All of that stuff is being captured as we speak, whether we know it or like it or not. And all of it is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. So you need to look at that particular article. Washington Post is reporting the NSA already has 4 primary data collection systems. We know there's obviously the primary facility in Fort Meade, Maryland. We know they're building that huge facility in Utah that either has already come online or is about to come online. My guess is as sections are completed, they're brought online. There's a new one they're building in San Antonio, Texas. We've got one here on the island of Oahu, right up next to the Echelon station in the middle of the island. They built that there. Look at how much money they're spending. That they're not spending your tax money. They're not spending it on your roads. They're not spending it on the bridges. They're not spending it on your schools. But they're spending it to watch you. That is how afraid of you they are. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And as I was talking about with one of our earlier callers, back in the era of Windows 2000, and the NSA key first became known to the public, one of the people over at Cryptome put out a little package where you could simply go into the operating system and overwrite that key. Now, the importance of that key is that the NSA can come into your computer and do anything they want to it that Microsoft could with their encryption key, including deleting files, changing the operating system, whatever they want. And so they put out this tool to simply go in, find that NSA key, and simply write garbage all over it, so the key would no longer work. Now, as I mentioned before, I went out and did a web search on that earlier today, not a mention of the any tools to find and delete or disable the NSA key. So we already know the search engine companies are compromised on this situation. And I have no doubt that computer security experts are already hard at work finding these NSA backdoors. And when they start publishing their keys and their tools on how to do it, we will certainly repost them to whatreallyhappened.com. Meanwhile, a listener just sent in a Google search string, which we just posted to whatreallyhappened.com, listing all these links to what are called one-time pad encryption technologies for your files. And we're going to start putting all of that stuff up. I went back through all my old source code from years ago, all the source code I saved on various codes and encryptions. We're going to start putting together a page of those tools. Not that I want you to use them because the NSA then knows the method, but to demonstrate how easy it is to actually come up with your own encryption. And by the way, another thing you might want to do, if you want to go ahead and use PGP or something for your email, what you do is you encrypt your message with something else, then send it through PGP. So a brute force clear text key search won't work. Layered encryption is very, very difficult to find the key, even if they know the method, because they have to try a key for layer 1, then go through all the keys of layer 2, then move to the next key in layer 1, then go all through all the potential keys of layer number 2. There are all kinds of ways to slow this down. And under the Fourth Amendment, we have a right to defend our privacy against a government that is going into our personal effects without proper authority, without probable cause, without evidence we have actually engaged in a criminal act of any kind. You have every right to protect your personal life from the prying eyes of a government that demonstrably will loot your intellectual property for their own profit. Now, a big story out there where apparently a reporter over at CBS, Cheryl Atkinson, is saying her computer was hacked. That apparently in the middle of the night she saw it turn itself on and all kinds of bad things were done to her files. NSA is already out there saying, oh, wasn't us. It was the Chinese. It was the Iranians. It was Elvis and his UFO. Wasn't us. We would never do anything like that. So America is waking up to the realization that the government has backdoors into all of your digital equipment, your computers, your tablets, your cell phones, all of that stuff. What else has a backdoor we have not been told about yet? I've noticed all the new cameras have a Wi-Fi link in there to send your photos conveniently to your computer. Do they also have a remote shut-off switch? We know this has been talked about before. Initially to protect live concerts from having pictures and videos, or even movie theaters, that you can't video the movie, and it's always in the context of we've got to stop those content pirates and everything like that. But it also means in the event of a riot where the government is coming in and clubbing people like they did with Occupy, can they send out a signal to turn off all the cell phone cameras? Yeah, probably. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And a listener just wrote in to remind us all that Cheryl Atkinson, this CBS reporter who is now reporting her computer got hacked by parties unknown. Actually, she says she has a pretty good idea who it is, but she's not saying until she gets some more evidence here. But this CBS reporter, Cheryl Atkinson, we get the pronunciation right on that, was one of the people who blew the lid off the Fast and Furious gun running scandal, where the same U.S. government that says you are not allowed to have military-style semi-automatic rifles was using your tax money to give those weapons to Mexican drug criminals, who then brought them back across the border into the United States of America. And apparently she has been working on a story regarding Benghazi. We don't know what the content of that story is. I'm sure the NSA does by now. But remember, Benghazi is the scandal they're trying to bury the deepest. Pay no attention to staged political theater at Benghazi. Look at IRS, look at NSA, look at DOJ, look at EPA, look at all these other things. Benghazi must go away. You will not think about Benghazi. So we're talking about backdoors into all electronics, and we know they've been talking about having a system to remotely disable cameras so that you don't get those embarrassing pictures of the police violating somebody's civil rights any longer. We know Apple's openly talking about having this built into all future iPhones, where if the police don't want you taking pictures of what's going on at this particular protest, your cell phone camera will quit working. So if you have an old digital camera that's still in good shape, hang on to that. One that they can't shut off remotely. We know not too long ago they were talking about how the new computerized cars that we're buying have a remote shut-off built in there, ostensibly so they can disable it if it's stolen from you, but also so they can turn off the engine when the government thugs want to pull you over for a talk. And again, remember, all these companies coming out and saying, oh, it wasn't that big a deal. Verizon built a dedicated fiber optic line from their servers to the NSA. So the NSA could just troll through all of their data at will. At will. So, we were talking about the huge $2 billion facility in Utah. They're building another one. They broke ground on a new one in Maryland next to the current NSA facility, building one down in San Antonio. As I said, they just built one here in Hawaii. They're building them everywhere to keep an eye on you, to make sure you're not having bad thoughts. And again, none of this is going to stop real terrorists or real criminals, drug smugglers, whatever, because they already know this stuff is being watched. They're using strong encryption where the method is not known to the NSA. So this is all about watching you, laying your private life completely open for examination so the government in its paranoia can come in and say, oh, I guess they're okay. Or not. People and governments who become paranoid, they see a threat everywhere. My wife signs her emails much light and many blessings. I imagine some NSA spook with his brain addled with all these antidepressants they've got to be on over there could look at much light. That could be code for nuclear bomb. Many blessings. That could be code for anthrax. When they get into that paranoid state, even the most innocent, benign statement can be viewed as having a sinister purpose to it. And we've seen it happen already. Again, that SWAT team raid on that home based on their purchase records at a local gardening store where they were buying these indoor glow lux bulbs for indoor gardening. Oh, they must be growing marijuana. And they kick down the door and they go in there and they find a vegetable garden being grown indoors because these people want to have a food supply that they're not dependent on the supermarkets and they're sure is not GMO. But we are in that global surveillance state George Orwell predicted in his novel 1984. And by the way, a good measure of the public reaction to this scandal is how copies of that book that's hitting new sales records. Everybody wants to buy a copy of 1984, or they want to go back and look at the movie about it and say, what were they talking about? And we're there. Now, China, of course, is seeing a wonderful opportunity to counter some of this propaganda coming out of the U.S. about, oh, the evil Chinese hackers, and they're doing this and they're doing that. And China's saying, you've got to explain all this monitoring of our people because we don't care about inside the United States and constitutional problems. It is against the law of China for you to be spying on us. And they're very concerned about all these taps into these internet service providers to simply scarf off all this information. The NSA is lawless. They are not complying with U.S. law. They are not complying with the Constitution. They see themselves as above the law, and that is the classic definition of a dictatorship. It's just amazing. Meanwhile, getting over to Edward Snowden, apparently he is considering seeking asylum in Iceland. Iceland, as you're probably already aware, has ended or frozen their attempt to join the European Union. So the extradition treaties with the European Union and the United States would not apply in Iceland. And Iceland, especially since their whole banking blow-up, where they threw their crooked bankers in prison, fired the government that helped the bankers loot the public, wrote off all that debt, and their economy's on the way up. And they have decided to become the world leader in information privacy. They have very strong laws regarding their computer systems, who can get in, who cannot. They are rapidly attracting clients from around the world who want to have internet servers that are not compromised by the NSA. We can't say for certain the NSA hasn't compromised them, but they seem to have a much stronger cultural resistance to that kind of tyranny here. Very bizarre story. Apparently on a U.S.-bound flight out of Hong Kong yesterday, there was a passenger, Daniel Perry, who started making these bizarre statements about how he was involved in all this NSA scandal. He'd already been interrogated once. He'd been poisoned. The NSA was after him. Apparently, so far, they have confirmed that he is, in fact, a government employee in some kind of security intelligence capacity. Beyond that, the story is dried up. There's one story going around that he may be on antidepressants, and that triggered the bizarre episode on the plane itself, and it could very well do so. And there's a very interesting point. Remember when we were talking about the link between SSRIs and acts of extreme violence? And we pointed out 10% of America are on these drugs, which presumably includes 10% of the government itself. And if it's tripping off these bizarre episodes of behavior, then the NSA's got a real problem. They're saying, you know, these so-called most trusted top secret people, if they're on these SSRIs, their brain could just go off in a complete tangent. Maybe Snowden was on SSRIs. And that's why he just felt it was completely appropriate for him to ignore his top secret clearance and go public on this stuff. And, of course, we're glad he did. But that puts the U.S. government in a really, really serious situation, because if they start banning SSRIs for people with top secret clearances, then they have to admit there's a problem with these medications, and that opens up that whole can of worms about all these mass shooters being used to justify the gun grab being on these very medications. So all the lies are starting to get tangled up with each other. They can't keep the story straight any longer. Apparently over in Antioch, this is being reported on the Intel Hub, the police are now asking postal workers and garbage collectors to spy on citizens if there's something questionable in your trash bin, or if you're getting plain brown unwrapped packages from who knows where. They'll keep a record. Oh, he's getting a plain brown package. I think maybe I'm going to send some books to my relations in plain brown wrappers, no return address. Ryan Dawson reported earlier today that the two most recent of his videos regarding the NSA scandal were for some strange reason frozen by YouTube. You'd click on the link, the video, not available, not available, not available, and we made the story public, and YouTube has now switched them back on. But when they're acting this overtly, it reveals just how scared they are that the American people are not going to stand for this. And you, the American people, shouldn't stand for it. There is a reason the creators of this nation put that Fourth Amendment in there. They knew from the abuses they had seen from the British government that allowed to simply intrude into people's private lives, the government would simply do that. And they'd look for dirt, or they'd look for something of value. And that's why that Fourth Amendment is in there. All right, I've talked about this enough here, but I've got all kinds of people starting to send me all this information on one-time encryption. We're going to start putting together, putting out stories of code examples and all this other stuff, so that those of you who really do have something that you need to keep from the government, you know, like your bikini photo collection or something like that, you've got a way to keep that from, you know, to protect your data. And I'm not addressing this to criminals and terrorists. I'm addressing this to ordinary, law-abiding Americans who understand the government does not have a legal right to come in and look at your private lives. And you have a right to protect your private lives from the government. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I want to talk a little bit about the rush to war in Syria. And I notice that the claims about Assad using chemical weapons on his own people has already gone away. Talking points are already gone. Nobody bought it. Nobody's believing it. They're back to saying, oh, it's a civil war. It's a humanitarian intervention. We're going to go in and humanely blow them all up and take control of their mineral resources and force a private central bank on them. Now, as part of this G8 conference, Barack Obama met with Vladimir Putin, and boy, just from the photos of the two of them sitting together, it is obvious it was not a cordial, pleasant meeting. And looking at the body language, it's very obvious that Obama did not succeed in changing Putin's mind on Syria. And looking at Putin, it's obvious he realizes war between Russia and the United States is now inevitable, because he sinned in taking control of their central bank. And he sinned in kicking out their money junkies, and that cannot be allowed to stand. And the money junkies of the world, the private central bankers, are saying, Russia must be destroyed. Just like what's-his-name Rothschild was saying back at the War of 1812, teach those Americans a lesson, bring them back to colonial status. We need a war to protect the private central bankers. And that's really what it's all about. And I love this little line. This was reported over at The Hill. President Obama failed on Monday to resolve disagreements with Russian President Vladimir Putin about the proper international response to Syria's civil war, probably because Putin knows it's not a civil war. It's a covert attempt at overthrow using hired mercenaries. So, anyway. Now, you need to remember something. Putin probably told Obama the same thing Russia had told the United States through former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and current Secretary of State John Kerry. When the U.S. goes into Syria and or Iran, Russia will turn it into the new Vietnam and just pour resources and weapons and materiel into the war zone and grind the United States down in a war of attrition, and Russia can do it. They can do it. They have a healthy economy over there right now since they took control of their central bank. They have the weapons. In fact, we posted a video of some of Russia's latest warplanes to whatreallyhappened.com, and oh boy, do those things. They're amazing. And unlike America's latest warplanes, they can fly in the rain. They can land on carriers, and they don't suffocate the pilots trying to fly them. And this is a very real, credible threat, and it's obvious Putin has come to understand that the U.S. is going to go ahead and have another war for the bankers, war to bring Bretton Woods back to the planet. And neither Russia or China want to go back to Bretton Woods because it cost them so heavily in the past. And they're not going to go back to that enslavement to the U.S. dollar. Now, apparently, there has been a gigantic explosion in a Russian military depot in the Samara region. It's a huge stockpile, 13 million military shells stored, huge explosion, burning off, the shells are cooking off, the firefighters can't even get close to there. Was it an accident? I don't know. They tend to be pretty good about fire prevention, where they store the things that go boom. Is it sabotage? Did somebody just send a message to Russia, stay out of Syria and Iran when we go in and conquer them and bring the blessings of private central banking to them? Could very well be. We're going to grab a phone call. Obi over in Colorado. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I have an idea. I don't know if it's going to work, but if we put everybody in Washington, D.C. on daily triple doses of milk of magnesia, maybe they won't be quite as full of what they're full of, and they might start thinking better.
Well, at least it would keep them in the bathrooms a lot longer and therefore less able to do trouble. I always think back to the first, not the first Batman movie, but the Batman movie with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson was doing the Joker, and he's got that wonderful line, "This town needs an enema." And every time I think of that, I see Washington, D.C. as the backdrop. And they're absolutely right about that.
Well, that's my idea, and I just thought I'd run it by you and lighten things up a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. It's definitely a good idea. Maybe it's all that antique lead plumbing and all those old buildings there in Washington, D.C. that's doing it. There's something in the water. And again, on a more serious note, it's probably most of those people are on prescription antidepressants. And they believe the propaganda that they're wonderful and happy pills and there are no adverse side effects until you read that little tiny paper that comes in the package from the pharmacy, and the really fine print takes a magnifying glass to read, and then you find out all the really bad things this stuff can be. And if we have a government that has addled its own brain on SSRIs, that goes a long way to explaining the very poor decision-making we're seeing coming out of Washington, D.C. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go and grab another commercial break. We will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're a half hour away from being joined by Paul from Poker Face talking about Freedom Palooza here. Now, an interesting story reported over at Intifada Palestine where the former French foreign minister basically went public saying the plans for war against Syria were made 2 years before the Arab Spring, which the propaganda is saying, oh, we're supporting the right of the Syrian people to stand up against their government, and they were making the plans to conquer Syria 2 years before there was any indication of any kind of domestic problem within Syria, which beggars the question, was all of this being ginned up right from the start? We know that Russia just kicked out a bunch of non-governmental organizations that were caught funneling aid to agent provocateurs to try and provoke riots and protests to make it look like the regime was in trouble. We know they tried to do that back in 2009 in Iran. It fell flat on its face. You know, the bad guys love to play dirty out there. They really, really do. Russia is again reasserting that it will veto any motion in the United Nations Security Council calling for a no-fly zone over Syria. And what Russia is doing is very clever. They do not want to be seen as escalating this situation. They're trying to be the adult in the room. They're trying to cool things down. Looking at Putin's face following his meeting with Obama, he obviously knows that's not working. So what Russia is going to do, they're chess players. What they're going to do is they're going to let the United States go up to the UN Security Council and say, we want a no-fly zone. Russia will then veto. The United States will then unilaterally declare on its own a no-fly zone over Syria. This is an act of war, unsanctioned by the United Nations, and at that point, Russia is justified in sending their S-300 missile defense systems to the Syrian government to hold off U.S. and Israeli overflights. And it makes the U.S. look like the aggressor, like we don't already know that's what's going on, and Russia looks like they're trying to keep the situation under control. Now, the public, the people who are expected to pay for all of this, who are expected to throw the lives of their children into this latest war for the glory and profitability of the private central banks, they're overwhelmingly opposed to any more escalation in Syria. They don't even send them bullets and guns. It's gone on far enough. 60% in this poll reported over at peoplepress.org, 60% are against it. Here at whatreallyhappened.com, we had our own poll. 90% are opposed. Nobody is buying this. Everybody is saying no, no more war, and the government is refusing to listen to you. Over at RINF.com, they have an article on the empire's new clothes, the naked imperialism of humanitarian intervention. And it's underscoring something we've said before. These cover stories for the wars, humanitarian intervention, we must save the people of this country from their brutal, evil tyrant. Everybody understands it's no more real than the claims about Iraq's nuclear bombs and Assad using chemical weapons on his own people. And by the way, little small technical point, talking about the rule of law. Syria has never signed the Chemical Weapons Convention. There is no treaty under which Syria says they recognize international rules for the use of chemical weapons. Syria can use chemical weapons. They aren't so far. Nobody's able to confirm it. We did confirm the rebels, the hired mercenaries, have sarin gas. We still don't know who gave it to them. The observers inside Syria from the United Nations and from the Red Cross are saying we can't confirm these claims that Assad's government is gassing his own civilian population. And again, why would he do that? Why would Assad gas his workers and his tax base? It doesn't get him anything. It opens the door to intervention. He doesn't gain anything gassing his own civilian population. And we know, was reported in the European press months ago, the White House greenlit a plan to give chemical weapons to the hired mercenaries, like the ones that the Turkish authorities found when they busted that safe house, to gas civilian population and blame Assad for it. So we know they were already planning a horrendous false flag. Apparently, a bunch of archbishops have been executed by the rebels. They wouldn't stand there and say the imaginary playmate in the sky favors the hired mercenaries over your own government. Another article over at Global Research talking about the collapse of this yet another claim about weapons of mass destruction. The Syrians have them. We must go in there. And they're screaming about all this stuff. And of course, it's utter hypocrisy for the United States government to even talk about this stuff, because right now, in this world, despite all the caterwauling about Saddam's weapons of mass destruction, and Iran's weapons of mass destruction, and Syria's weapons of mass destruction, the only nation on earth to have ever used a nuclear weapon of mass destruction against the civilians of another country is the United States of America. And the U.S. government has really no moral authority to scream and cry about Assad using chemical weapons on his own people following that disaster in Waco, Texas, where the U.S. government gassed a church full of women and children to death with a poison gas that is actually illegal to use on enemy troops in time of war. The hypocrisy is astounding here. Now, we've got this story, and it makes a lot of sense. This is out of the Star Telegram, where the preparations to send weapons to the Syrian rebels began long before Obama's announcement, long before the claim that Syria had crossed the red line. And it makes sense. We're already hearing from the hired mercenaries. They're getting the weapons delivered, which means they had to be pre-positioned right at the border, stockpiled, ready to go as soon as Obama gave the order. Oh, Assad has crossed the red line. We've got to send this stuff in. And apparently the hired mercenaries are now getting anti-tank rockets and anti-aircraft missiles, Stingers, or the equivalent, just like they did with the Afghans to use against the Soviet Union. And it may be too little too late, because apparently Assad's forces are regaining vast swaths of their country from the hired mercenaries. And remember, the hired mercenaries, they're not committed. They're not dedicated to this war. They're there for a paycheck. And they understand they have to be alive to spend all that money that they're being given to go in and commit these atrocities. And that means when they come up against hard, harsh fighting, they're going to run. I'm not going to get killed here in Syria. I don't get to spend all this money I've been making. The Syrian forces are fighting for their homes and their loved ones they can see in front of them with their eyes. That's why the U.S. lost Vietnam despite overwhelming weapon superiority and financing. Those soldiers in Vietnam knew they were not there to protect the United States of America. They were there for a paycheck. And they were fighting a force, although inferior in weapons, were fighting for their own homes, for their history, for their heritage, for their families, for their culture. And the U.S. got clobbered. Now, over in Great Britain, David Cameron is still out there saying, yes, we will support a no-fly zone over Syria, and we've got to go in and we've got to get rid of Assad. Calling him, we've got to act against the dictatorial and brutal leader, President Assad. Now, dictatorial and brutal leader means Assad is refusing to allow a private central bank to take control of Syria's economy, and he refuses to sell Syria's oil only for U.S. dollars. That's what brutal and dictatorial leader actually means. It's all driven by the money. It's all driven by the bankers. It's all driven by a United States government that has absolutely destroyed America's economy. They're holding it up with fraud and deception, and they see their only salvation to keep the party going is to force the world back onto Bretton Woods, force the world back onto the petrodollar deal, and the rest of the world is saying, no, we don't want to do that. It doesn't work for us. Latest polls in Britain are showing the majority of the British people are absolutely opposed to any more support for the hired mercenary army. It's costing them a huge amount of money. It is earning them the hostility and enmity of most of the world. And worse, everybody is concerned and ought to be. The U.S. and Britain are giving weapons to Al-Qaeda, to those members of Al-Qaeda who don't realize they're actually working for Mossad and CIA. They're in there for religious reasons or whatever. And they will turn those weapons against the West. That's what happened in Afghanistan. They went into the Mujahideen, they gave them Stingers, anti-tank rockets, all this stuff. And then after the Soviet Union was kicked out, the U.S. dropped complete support for the new government of Afghanistan, the Taliban, and then turned around and years later came in and kicked them out because they wouldn't allow that oil company consortium pipeline to be built, and they weren't allowing the opium poppies to bloom. And so now a lot of these people who are opposed to the United States are using weapons given to them by the United States of America. We saw that up in Iraq, where the Iraqi people would join the U.S. forces. They'd get trained, they'd get weapons, then they desert, take their weapons, and start killing our troops. And so, yeah, we ought to be concerned after decades of demonization of Al-Qaeda, and we find out now our government is giving weapons to the Al-Qaeda. This is a scandal on the same scale as Fast and Furious, where the government is spending your tax money to give military-style assault rifles to drug gangs in Mexico, who then bring them back up across the border and sell them to criminals. such a deal. I didn't pay anything for this AK-47. I didn't pay anything for this M16. I'm going to take it across that wide open southern border that's down there. And I'll find some inner city gang love to buy this thing. Putin is lecturing David Cameron in Britain on their immorality in Syria. He's absolutely right about that. Meanwhile, over in Israel, we're getting this story. This is reported over at defensenews.com. Israel to seek U.S.-backed loan for mega arms deal. Israel's defense ministry not happy with the billions and billions of dollars that you taxpayers have already given them. They're asking for the U.S. government to be the guarantee for billions of dollars in low-interest bridge loans for a package proposed by the Pentagon. This was the Pentagon's idea. V-22 Ospreys, I hope they got those fixed so they're not falling out of the air. F-15 radars, the look-down, shoot-down radar for the F-15s they already have, and precision strike munitions. They're going to pay back the loans with future military aid from the U.S., which means one way or the other, you, the American people, are going to pay for all of this. Do you remember the Cranston Amendment to the Foreign Appropriations Bill? The U.S. government is committed to always giving Israel enough money to pay back its loans. So do you see the scam that's going on? It doesn't matter how they phrase it. Oh, it's only a loan guarantee, but we're going to pay the loan back from money from the American people. One way or the other, your wealth is being leached off to support Israel's war machine. And all of it is illegal under the Symington Amendment to the Foreign Appropriations Act and the Glenn Act, which says the United States government cannot give support to any nation in possession of nuclear weapons technology that refuses to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and refuses IAEA inspections. Both the United Nations and the United States repeatedly requested Israel to sign that treaty and allow inspections in order to make all this money flowing from your pocket to theirs legal, and Israel continues to refuse. They're above international law, don't you know? And they got caught trying to sell a nuclear weapon to the former government of South Africa, which is the very activity the Non-Proliferation Treaty is supposed to prevent. Israel's using the Non-Proliferation Treaty to create a market monopoly. Yes, we're the only country on earth selling clandestine nuclear weapons around the world, and we can charge whatever we want for them. Profits, profits, profits. And if they were trying to sell one to South Africa, it's a given they were selling them everywhere else. There is evidence to suggest that North Korea's first nuclear weapons test involved a weapon they purchased from Israel because its radiological signature from the fallout matched that of a joint Israel-South African test down in the South Atlantic, the so-called Vela incident. Meanwhile, there's a new phenomenon over in the West Bank called the Occupy movement, where the illegal settlers are starting to occupy Palestinian villages. Not content with all their settlements built at U.S. taxpayer expense, now they're simply mobbing a Palestinian village and driving out the Palestinians and saying, this is now ours. All of it in defiance of numerous United Nations resolutions, all of it a violation of international law, all of it a violation of Palestine's national sovereignty, now that the UN has recognized them as a state. When you have a group of people, let alone an entire nation, that feels that they don't have to follow the rules everybody else does, it is guaranteed to lead to war. And in the nuclear age, that's a dangerous situation. I mean, 2,000 years ago, when the Israelites were just these nomadic goat herders in tents, wandering around and spinning stories of David and Solomon to impress the world how important they were. If they wanted to go smiting each other, no big deal. But in the nuclear age, continuing to act like an Old Testament tribal chieftain is very, very dangerous. Now, as you know, over in Iran, they just had their presidential elections, and Ahmadinejad, of course, because of term limits, is now having to step down from the office. I noticed John Oliver on The Daily Show last night was still selling the idea of Ahmadinejad was this evil tyrant and he wanted to destroy Israel, and he's still going along with all this stuff. We know it was all nonsense, mistranslations. And now they've got this new guy, Rouhani, who's in. He's a moderate. Iran has a working democracy. They have honest elections, certainly far more honest than we have here in the United States of America. But he's already come out saying we want to be transparent, we want to work with the rest of the world, but we are going to continue Iran's nuclear programs for nuclear power, medical isotopes, and industrial applications. They're not building weapons. They are availing themselves of their rights to use nuclear technology for peaceful purposes under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which Iran has signed, and so has the United States. Now, they've already offered a olive branch in which Iran is now saying they will suspend the 20% uranium enrichment, which has been a sticking point at the P5+1, but only if the West is willing to relax the sanctions. Why this is not going to work when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're about 6 minutes away from the top of the hour, and hopefully Paul from Poker Face will be joining us to talk about Freedom Palooza 2013 and all that they're doing. Now, as I mentioned before we went to the commercial break, the new incoming president of Iran has offered an olive branch to try and defuse this whole so-called Iranian crisis, where they will halt 20% uranium enrichment if the West will relax the sanctions. Seems like a reasonable deal, but it's not going to happen. The U.S. ultimate agenda with Iran is to force Iran to accept a private central bank in control of the nation's economy and to sell their oil only for U.S. dollars. So I predict the United States will adopt the Israeli negotiating strategy of give us everything we want first, and then maybe we'll do something nice for you. And, of course, what the U.S. will demand is a shutdown of all Iran's nuclear infrastructure. The nuclear power station, the medical isotope factories, the industrial applications, and all of the centrifuges. That's what they're going to demand, and, of course, that's a non-starter. Iran is standing on the letter of the law in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And the U.S. will adopt this position in order to prevent any kind of a settlement or agreement that's going to get in the way of the ultimate agenda of war on Iran to take control of their natural resources and their economy. I guarantee you that's what's going to happen. Remember back when they were rushing to war with Iraq, and in the 11th hour, Saddam Hussein basically said, okay, whatever you want, you can look anywhere you want to make sure we don't have nuclear weapons. You can look in my bathroom, you can look under my bed, you can look in my little treasure box of photos from my childhood. And the U.S. said, nope, too little, too late. You should have agreed when we told you to agree. And the war was on, because it was never about Saddam's weapons of mass destruction. There weren't any. There were no nuclear bombs that were going to threaten us all in 45 minutes. It was a crock of U.S. government, USDA choice-approved bovine excrement. And maybe we might have given the government the benefit of the doubt back then. I certainly didn't. But most Americans said, yes, our government would never lie to us about something as serious as a nuclear weapon threat. Now, of course, you know better. Now you know better. Wars are started with lies, fraud, and deception. And the arrogance of the U.S. government to go on telling you the same lies over and over again and demand that you prove your loyalty by believing the bovine excrement is shocking. Do they really think they're fooling anybody? When they come out and say, Assad has crossed the red line, he gassed his own people, and we don't have any proof that we can show you, but you just take our word for it. Do they really think that's going to work? Apparently. They got to be on SSRIs. Their decision-making is just terrible right now. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we go to our on-air guest, I do want to comment. The latest claim coming out of the NSA hearings in Congress is, and this is coming from an FBI official, that the NSA, spying on all of us, foiled a bomb plot at the New York Stock Exchange. And this is nonsense. And do you know why? because the FBI never hesitated to make headline news out of all these little entrapment operations that they set up. So why would this have been kept secret at the time? They're just making this stuff up out of thin air to try and convince you this stuff is good. Yes, terrorism is bad. You want to stop terrorism? There's an easy way. Stop screwing around with other people's countries. But they want to go on screwing with other people's countries. It's our manifest destiny to screw with other people's countries, and you Americans will just have to pay for it and throw your children's lives into it for the greater glory of private central banking. Harumph, harumph, harumph. How do you know when the government is lying? Their lips move and words pour forth. All righty, joining us on the air is Paul from the band Poker Face to talk about Freedom Palooza. And Paul, would you do me a favor? I actually am not sure about the pronunciation of your last name. Would you share that with us?
Like spaghetti, brother, Topetti.
Topetti, okay. Now I know, and I'll use your last name. So this is Paul Topetti from Poker Face. Please tell us about Freedom Palooza.
Freedom Palooza was a concept that we put together many years ago and want to actually take it nationwide. But back in the pre-Y2K days, I'm sure you remember the preparedness expos that were going around the country. They had some great vendors, and they had some good speakers, but they were lacking music. And then early 90s, my bandmates and I were going to shows like the Lollapalooza where they had great music, but then they had freaks, like a circus freak show that came along with it. So our idea was to merge the two together and, have great vendors, great speakers, and great music, and a great location to have it at. So Freedom Palooza, this is our third year running. We still haven't been able to take it nationwide yet, but we have a few friendly cities coming up. Like there's a place outside of Nashville, Tennessee that we had a great time earlier this year, and we spoke to the owners. There's Knob Creek, Kentucky, where we'll probably be doing another one in that area, and then the other one would be Austin, Texas. So it has the potential to grow into a traveling summertime tour where we come into your city and we leave you a little freer and a little bit wiser when we leave you. And it's basically an education forum to educate Americans, on the lies coming out of D.C., on the truth that they're not telling you, on solutions that are out there, but you don't hear it on your mainstream news. And it's a place where patriots can become friends. I mean, right now, Mike, you and I have been emailing back and forth for years. We've been on phone and Skype for years, but one of these years I'd love to have you at it so that I can actually press the flesh, man,
Well, I'd love to be there. I'd love to be there. And unfortunately, one of the downsides of living here on the island of Oahu, besides breathing all that Monsanto GMO pollen every day, is it's always a major financial hassle to go to any of these. And my wife and I are talking about relocating to the mainland so that I can go out and start doing more of these personal appearance type situations and get the message out to people who are not necessarily plugged into the virtual world just yet. I remember fondly in California, and by the way, we're going to be keeping you past this commercial break so we don't have to rush on any of this stuff. I remember in California there was this group that was always all over California, the Renaissance Pleasure Fair. There was one in the south, one in the north. They had another one that was an Americana festival, and it sounds to me like you've adopted the same model, and it is a successful model to simply take this from place to place. When we come back from this commercial break, though, I would really like to focus on the upcoming one, where it is, how people can get involved, how they can find where you're going to be, how they can basically show up and have a really good time. So we're going to take a break for commercials here. We'll be back with Paul Topetti from Freedom Palooza after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Paul Topetti of the band Poker Face, and we're talking about Freedom Palooza. And Paul, just take it away. How can people get to the most recent edition of Freedom Palooza?
To get the address, telephone number, directions to the event would go to Freedom Palooza, Palooza, 2 O's, freedompalooza1word.com. Gets you to the page. You can scroll through some articles. You can see some previous speakers from the last 2 years. The cost for this year is $30 for all 3 days, or $15 a day. The $15 includes camping for the night and parking. There is food there. Johnny Mac's, American Grill are the hosts, and they're providing food at reasonable cost for the people showing up. And we do allow beer in cans and wine in boxes, but nothing in glass. Coolers will be inspected to make sure that that's all there is. It is a family event, and we don't need glass being broken on the grounds and then people getting hurt, especially the kids.
And we don't need agent provocateurs coming in there to cause a ruckus so that the local government will say, oh, you can't do this anymore, which is probably...
You know what the funny thing was, brother, is the local Khazar was the first year trying to get a hold of me so that he could do a hit piece. And I basically ignore the Jewish press anymore. We don't even let them know about the events as it comes up because all they do is they get hysterical and, they bring in the ADL to lambast us, to slander us, and impugn our character, or the Southern Poverty Law Center with Mark Potok.
Yeah.
So we just ignore them now. And the first year, because we ignored him, he called the cops on us and he called the fire department up on us and the township commissioner and tried to get them all riled up. And it didn't happen. In fact, the cop that came by, which is really interesting, state cops police that area, and state cop pulled in the morning. He said, what you guys got going on here? I said, celebration to our Forefathers Day. He goes, that's good. Go, yeah, did you guys get a call about this? And he's like, yeah, we got a call about this, but I just wanted to drive by to let you know that we know about your party and everything's cool with us. And we know who the problem is, don't we, Paul?
Yeah.
And I looked at him. I go, the bankers? And he just smiles, shakes his head, and drives off.
Yeah, some of the cops are really cool. We're very lucky out here in Hawaii. Most of the police are pretty mellow and pretty much plugged in with what's going on. There's a smattering of the SSRI poisoned jerks here. And it's refreshing to know that all these groups are out there, like the Southern Poverty Law Center, and they're screaming, they're terrorists and everything. And I actually take it as a point of pride that my website, whatreallyhappened.com, is on the Southern Poverty Law Center's list of websites you should never, ever, ever, ever look at or your nose will drop off. And so I feel like I made the varsity team on that one. I just put a link to your website, freedompalooza.com, from my website, whatreallyhappened.com, so people can go in there and take a look at it. And I think I still have the banner ad from last year's, and I'll just put that up in the side menu so people can find this. And again, when is this all happening?
It starts in the evening of the 4th of July. Most folks have family functions, friend functions to go to, and we welcome that. Please go. But like after you bid your dues and kiss each other for, till next year or whatever, make your way down. It'll start probably like 6, 7-ish. The first band will probably go on or about 7, 8-ish. So people can start setting up camp for the weekend, and they can stay through Sunday if they like, through Sunday night. And it's picturesque, Upper Bucks County. It's where world jewelries run out of, not Tel Aviv, not City of London, not New York, not Miami, not L.A., but Upper Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
Okay,
same place
so
where the Rosicrucians. Same place as the Rosicrucians Temple. We have the pyramids here, right here in Quakertown, again in Upper Bucks County. So.
What's the nearest major city for people who are trying to figure out exactly where you're talking about?
If you come up Route 78, Easton is the last city before you hit New Jersey. It's 15 miles south on 611. Or if you went straight out of Philadelphia on Broad Street, Bullies Boulevard, and took that north about an hour, north of New Hope, you would arrive in scenic Pennsylvania, about 5 miles north of where Washington did his crossings to rout the Hessians and turn the tide of the war.
All right. Well, it sounds like a lot of fun, and if I were on the mainland, I would really, I would accept your invitation to show up there. I get a lot of invitations, and I always feel bad when I have to turn them down, but everything from Hawaii is a 5-hour flight, minimum, and plus I got to get
brother, move to the hills of Pennsylvania, man. The Poconos are beautiful, lush, green. There's food in the woods. There's streams everywhere. It's not like the deserts of the Southwest. It's not like, the crazy rains of the Northwest. Well, we got all 4 seasons here.
I'm an old New England kid, and that's one possibility. Moving back to that area, got lots of family, lots of choirs and musicians for my wife to throw sheet music at, and
there you go.
Yeah, we're looking at making that happen sometime really, really soon. Because Hawaii is nice, but after 10 years of looking at string bikinis, they've kind of lost their fascination for me, and I'm ready to get back to someplace with a more interesting geology to play around with, because everything around here is the wonderful world of basalt. Anything else you'd like to share with our listeners and audience regarding Freedom Palooza and how they can come up and just, it sounds like it's going to be a fun weekend, just really mellow, really low-key, people just listening to music and talking about the very bad direction this nation's going in.
Well, a couple things. We have bonfires every night, which are probably the best part of each evening. We have speakers like James Trafficant coming, Cynthia McKinney, Gunners of America, Larry Pratt. it's the place to be, brother. It's the place where friends become patriots become friends, and you get to see some great musicians singing their hearts out, man.
All right, well, do me a favor and give my best to Jim and Cynthia. And again, these are people that I've known virtually and traded emails and Skype sessions with. I'd like to meet them and shake their hands in person and tell them well done for all that they have done for this country.
Yeah, people need to go to freedompalooza.com the week of the bash, because we're going to be posting the how to watch the live stream coming off the site. So we are going to be broadcasting it over the net.
All right, I will definitely put that up at my website as well, so people can basically tune in and look at Freedom Palooza. And this actually gets into something I was talking about yesterday. Now that we're all aware, most of us already knew it, but now that the general public is aware that the government is watching everything you do online, it's time to go back to HumanNet, where you just go out and you talk to people on carbon-based life forms, you shake their hand, you talk to them, because that the government can't track,
Amen.
and that the government can't monitor. And that's going to make them even more nervous and paranoid than they are right now. Oh, my goodness, they're talking to each other in the real world. We can't control that. We can't listen to that. And anything that we do that makes them a little bit more nervous is bringing us closer to the day when the whole shebang comes crashing on down and we start working on the blueprint for the new America.
For more freedom, brother. Real
Absolutely,
freedom.
absolutely. Thank you. Thanks an awful lot.
I appreciate it.
You got it. And we will be keeping tabs on Freedom Palooza. We will be running the live stream here. And it sounds like it's a lot of fun just to get out there with a bunch of like-minded fellow Americans and just really sort of reinforce each other. Yeah, we know there's a problem. And we're not going to believe this bovine excrement that anybody unhappy with the government is just this lone fringe kook tinfoil hat person that you shouldn't talk to. That's one of the biggest lies they're forcing on you right now, that you are alone in your concerns for the course of the nation. You're not alone. You are in the majority. You are in the majority, and you need to recognize that. All righty, we're going to get back here to Iran and their recent presidential election. And very interesting article out of MiddleEastMonitor.com. Ahmadinejad's departure is a loss for Israel. They've lost their big uber demon that they were saying, oh, see, Ahmadinejad is this and Ahmadinejad is that. And even John Oliver on last night's Daily Show was kind of going along with that about how evil and bad he was. And they keep going back to that old canard about how Ahmadinejad wanted to wipe Israel off the map. And, of course, we know he never actually said that. It was a mistranslation. Mistranslations are one of the most powerful propaganda tools they have. They'll show you a video of the person speaking something, and then they'll put a subtitle or a voiceover and say, this is what he was saying, and unless you speak the language, you don't know if it's true. We know that MEMRI, the Middle East Media Research Institute, which provides free translations of Arab Muslim articles to the Western media, is an Israeli propaganda front. They've been exposed. And we know that wipe Israel off the map was one of their many, many deliberate mistranslations. So anyway, this article over here at Middle East Monitor is saying that the loss of Ahmadinejad means Israel doesn't have that horrible villain dictator that they can point to as a reason for pushing forward with war. Well, that's not exactly true. It's not a huge loss, because you remember Ahmadinejad's demonization was based on these false statements, complete fictions. And no doubt the same professional propagandists are going to do exactly the same thing with Rouhani. He can come out talking about the fact that Iran's university just took second place in the U.S. satellite competition. And they'll put a caption under that, Rouhani says that we have to destroy Jerusalem. And most people, if they're not aware that this mistranslation is a common facet of propaganda, they're going to go along with it. And by the way, that's true. Tehran's Amir Kabir University took second place in the United States CanSat 2013 competitions. There were 25 teams around the world where they design and build little tiny satellites. They call them CanSats. And Iran came in second place. That's a happening place. They love technology. They love science. They love the future. They love problem solving. Now, apparently over in Benghazi, the Prime Minister of Libya is up there following the cessation of bloody clashes that have been taking place up there. And it's very obvious those Libyan people do not love their new U.S.-approved puppet regime. They do not love their brand new private central bank issuing all of the public currency as a loan at interest. They're starting to fight back. What's the U.S. going to do? Invade a second time? We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I really do love that song. I really do. Apologies to my wife and everything, but that is a very, very good song. Alrighty, our phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443, a little over half an hour left to the end of today's show here. Taking a quick look at the stock market, the plunge protection team was definitely at work just cranking that back up there so the government can say, look, the economy's great. Look at the stock market. Look at how rich the money junkies are getting, and you should be just happy and thrilled that they are doing so well in this country. Meanwhile, over in Poland, yet another of the many CIA secret torture centers has surfaced again to the great consternation of the Polish government. And apparently the government in Poland is trying to stall, drag out, hoping that if they stall this obvious war crime long enough that all the witnesses and prisoners will be dead and they can just say, all right, well, it's history now here. Scandal breaking over at Annapolis. This is being reported by CBS, where apparently there is a major problem with rape. Apparently some of these female midshipmen are being sexually assaulted. They try and complain about it. They're told, well, your career in the Navy is over if you dare bring charges against whatever. And it does show there is a deterioration of morale within the nation's military. The way a government or a tyrant gets their soldiers to go out and do all these horrible things is convincing them that they're morally superior. And there's a just cause. Remember what Sun Tzu said about the army with the moral right on their side is the army that wins. But when we're seeing this growing problem within our rank-and-file military of assault, rape, drug abuse, theft, killing of innocents, it tells us the U.S. military rank-and-file are no longer buying this idea that they're somehow morally right to do what they do. We saw it over there in Israel, where apparently some of their very lovely female IDF soldiers posted some photos of themselves in scantily clad, and of course Israel's all just, oh, how dare they act so, because they may be out there showering white phosphorus all over innocent Palestinian children, but by golly, those women keep their clothes on to prove that they're a just and moral people. And it's one of these many hypocrisies, dichotomies, that underscore what a complete fraud all of these wars are. These people know they're not serving any noble purpose. They're the invading horde. They're the conquering army that's going into other countries to steal that nation's wealth for their masters back home. And they understand they're not morally right. And it begins to affect them in other areas of their behavior. Yeah, why not grab that curvy midshipman? You know, we're already out here committing all these other war crimes. What's one more crime going to amount to? Now, up in Montreal, and I got to be honest, when I read this story, I started laughing. Apparently, Montreal's mayor, Michael Applebaum, he's a recent replacement. He took over the office of mayor because of a corruption scandal that basically brought down the previous mayor. And, of course, Michael Applebaum came in and promised to restore public trust in the Montreal city government, and he has now been arrested in a bribery case. They can't even keep these guys in office for a month before it catches up with them. And it's just a reminder. The wrong kind of people are attracted to political power. And the moral and the immoral are mutually exclusive societies. Neither one tolerates the presence of the other, which means once a government starts to go bad, it goes all the way bad. They don't want anybody in there to spoil the party. That's why they work so hard to keep Ron Paul out. That's why they work so hard to kick out Cynthia McKinney. It is totally corrupt, top to bottom. Now, the corporate media was going on earlier today about the crisis of credibility that Obama is now facing. His approval numbers are down in the Al-Qaeda, and they were saying, oh, only 45% of Americans think Obama's doing a good job. And I said, that number's nonsense. That number is about as accurate as the unemployment numbers we're getting from government and the corporate media. So we ran our own poll on whatreallyhappened.com, and as of the last time I checked, we had only 4% of the respondents saying they approve of President Obama, and 96% said no. The writing is on the wall. Now, getting into the economy, over at INFOWARS.com, and paying attention to Max Kaiser, he had an article out there, "The collapse of the current bankster regime is upon us. I certainly hope he is right, because those private central banks issuing the public currency as a loan at interest is the common enemy of all mankind. They have to be brought down." But I have to take issue with Max Kaiser on one of his statements in there. It says, we're in a post-capitalist, post-socialist world, and he talks about being at the G8 protests, and he says this point needs to be made. We're seeing some vestiges of both systems in a new emerging economy that has yet to be named, and he's wrong. This is not a new emerging economy. We have seen this before, and it does have a name. It's called fascism. And when we come back from this commercial break, I will explain exactly why I say that. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, we're talking about Max Kaiser's comment on the collapse of the current bankster regime is upon us. I certainly hope so. Rule by compound interest, rule by fraudulently created debt is illegitimate as a form of governance. It's no more legitimate than rule by divine right or rule by chattel ownership of your person, meaning slavery. But Max Kaiser is out there saying we're seeing a new economic system with some vestiges of socialism and capitalism, and it is yet to be named. And he's completely missed it. It's an old system, and it has a name, fascism. Now, let me give you the definitions here one more time, and there will be a pop quiz next class. Capitalism is a system under which if you make money, you keep it. If you lose money, you live with that debt. Freedom means the freedom to succeed and the freedom to fail and the responsibility to live with the results. Socialism. If you make money, it is taxed away from you to support society. If you lose money, society is taxed to cover the losses so you can start again. That's socialism. Fascism is if you make money, you keep it. That's from capitalism. If you lose money, society is taxed to cover the losses. That's the part from socialism. Which system do you see in operation in the United States of America right now? Which system do you see in operation all over the European Union? Which system do you see in operation in every single nation slave to a private central bank issuing the public currency as a loan at interest? We have seen this before. It has a name. It's fascism. Now, the corporate media is going on. Apparently, there's a new poll. The majority of Americans now believe that Obama did directly order the IRS targeting. That is an impeachable offense. It was one of the articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon. I'll put up our own poll after the radio show today, and I already know what it's going to say. 90% think that Obama did this. 90% are going to say, no way did the Internal Revenue Service on their own undertake politically motivated harassment and targeting. Going to take a phone call here. Space in New York. Aloha, Space. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
To you, Mike. Number one, somebody on this network, I was half asleep, and he mentioned that the Obamacare thing, it's really Obama crap. And he said that IRS hired 16,000 agents, and that the IRS is controlling the Obamacare program. They have like 37 taxes or penalties, and that they got this IRS scandal out now to say like, oh, everything's okay, we fixed it up, and then they're going to clobber us.
Well, I agree with that last part. They're coming to clobber us. They're desperate for wealth to keep this little Ponzi scheme going, and what they don't seem to grasp or they're unwilling to accept is we've run out of wealth out here in America. We're barely surviving as it is. There is no more surplus wealth to be scraped in, and their talons are coming back to Wall Street and Washington, D.C. with wood chips instead of money because they've hit the bottom of the barrel out there. But you're absolutely...
They didn't hit the bottom of the barrel. They still didn't go through the pension funds and the IOAs and the 401ks.
Oh, they're talking about
That's going to be coming.
No, they're already talking about that. They're talking about a new federal government retirement program, forgetting about that we already had one called Social Security, which got looted, especially during the Clinton years. And they're going to say, you have to turn over your private retirement accounts, and we'll give you a treasury bond, a pretty printed piece of paper, which will be completely worthless. They've already overprinted those things. And
Yeah.
it is. The reason the IRS is in charge of Obamacare is it's not about your care, it's not about your health, it's all about making sure you give more of your money to health insurance companies and or the government. That's all it's about. The insurance companies wrote most of Obamacare. And, the IRS has already been caught stealing medical records of Americans to which they legally do not have access. And yeah, it's just, they are desperate to take more money from you, to prop up that failed Ponzi scheme central bank. And if they can succeed in taking away your guns, they're going to come after your physical gold and silver and even platinum. I guarantee you. They did it once before in 1933. To save the banks. To save the banks. They have to save the banks because under the U.S. government model, banks are more important than human beings. Human beings, we got too many of those. We don't care if they're committing suicide because of financial ruin. We must save the banks. Look at them. They're beautiful. They're granite. They have columns out front. Aren't they beautiful? We must always worship the banks. It's a little sick, if you ask me. Anything else, Space?
Yes, another thing. Does this big shift in world economics and leadership, does this parallel the Middle Ages at all when, I don't exactly know what went on, but like the church was like a real central power. They had control over everything. They went absolutely nuts. They were killing white witches, black witches. They just went nuts. And there was some kind of shift going on. I don't know. How many people did they kill?
Quite a few. I mean, the campaign against the Albigensians in southern France, they wiped out 1/3 the population of southern France, trying to make sure they got all of the biological descendants of the original historical Jesus. Because they were setting up a church saying, we're in control of Christianity because, hey, he was my great-great-great-great-grandfather. And over in the Catholic Church, where they're running on this idea of apostolic descent, where we get control of the church because we were his good buddies, obviously, a church run by Jesus' actual blood descendants was a major threat to their power. So they go on over and they wipe out 1/3 the population of southern France. And it's all about the money. And the overt reason was the Catholic Church had imposed a tax on all the Catholic world. Not just voluntarily go into the church and throw your money in the plate every Sunday. You were mandated to turn over a portion of your wealth to the church on a regular basis. The Cathars absolutely refused to do that, said, we're not part of your Christian church. We have one of our own. And the Pope said, absolutely not, and sent in the Pope's armies and basically killed them all. 1/3 the population of southern France. Plus, there's all the so-called Holy Crusades to go out and seize control of the Holy Lands, which was actually all about trade routes. Because ocean travel was still kind of a minority thing. There were a lot of trade from Turkey and Africa and Asia still had to go around that eastern end of the Mediterranean. And if you were in possession of that piece of real estate, all the tolls for passage through there went into your pocket, and that was the real reason for the Holy Crusades, was to seize control of those key trade routes.
All right, and if I could say one more thing, you mentioned about Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And now, Jesus said to love your enemies. I mean, it's not to say just bend over and just...
a lot of what is attributed to the historical Jesus was actually crafted after the Council of Nicaea. And there's really not much evidence that the real Jesus ever said any of that. You need to go back to the Gnostic Gospels, which are the texts that actually go back to the time of his life, like the Gospel of Thomas, where it's contemporary with Jesus, as opposed to all of the accepted, old New Testament books were written, 100 years after he was gone, and were written with a specific agenda in mind of crafting a religion around Jesus that would be palatable to the Roman public, who had the money at the time. And so a lot of what the Bible says about Jesus, we have absolutely no way of knowing. They even got his name wrong. Because his name was Yeshua, and through botched translations they came up with Jesus, but it's now known Yeshua is actually Joshua. That was his real name, Joshua Christ, Yeshua. And it's all botched up, and all these translations are there to serve the commercial interests of the commercialized, corporatized Christian church. And it's all about the money. Look at that Vatican that they've built there. And,
right.
I love the comment that the Daily Show made on that, where they were responding to that comment from inside the Vatican that there's a gay lobby. And John Oliver was saying, of course there is. Look at the place. It looks like Liberace's wet dream with all the painting and
they're all
decoration.
pedophiles. Are you kidding?
Well, it is a beautiful place. I will grant them that. I've been to the Vatican. I had a chance to look at the Sistine Chapel when they were still in the middle of the reconstruction, cleaning off all the grime and grit there. And it is a beautiful place, and there's a lot of history there. Obviously, the Catholic Church has their problems. Go back and look at the history of Pope Alexander VI and the wild parties he threw in the Vatican. It's a corrupted organization. Large organizations tend to be corrupted. And I think the Cathars did have the right idea that Christian churches ought to be just community-based with no overarching hierarchy or control, that each little church was its own separate thing taking care of its local community. And that's kind of a cool way to sort of keep that church subservient to the needs of the people rather than becoming a new ruling power structure to oppress all of mankind.
And then, I feel that, people should get together and in groups and pray or think of loving thoughts and to pray for these people who have lost their way. They don't know what they're doing, and they don't understand the chaos that they're unleashing on us because they're money junkies, there's no thinking at all.
Well, I agree with the second part, but obviously being a person who is devoid of religion, I don't think prayer does much of anything except keep you on your knees with your hands clasped together, which the money junkies love because then you're harmless. You're not a threat to them when you're on your knees praying to the imaginary playmate in the sky. So I prefer a more direct intervention, which is why my wife and I are involved in these local Feeding the Hungry programs. We actually get a tangible result. Oh, look, we've got one more family that didn't starve to death this last week.
So minds are joined. If we can share some positive thoughts and send them outward, everybody receives those thoughts instead of fear thoughts.
Well, again, I don't agree with you on that one. I think actions speak louder than words. If you want a heaven on earth, you have to go out and make it happen through direct action. Projecting thoughts and prayer, I'm sorry, it doesn't do anything. Makes you feel good, makes you feel like you did something. But you need to get out there and get hands-on with what's going wrong with your community and, help the people who've gone hungry, people whose food stamp money has run out, people who've been cheated out of their homes by the banks. You've got to get out there and get involved. You're going to have your Buddha on the road moment when you get out there. But I'm sorry, I disagree with this idea that prayer is going to change anything about the world. The money junkies love for you to be praying because then you're out of the way and you're harmless. And that's why the churches get those tax exemptions to keep you in the church and everything like that, because then you're corralled and you're penned in and you are not a threat to their power structure. Okay? So I know there's a lot of good people in a lot of different religions, and they mean well, but if you want to get out there, Ben Franklin, God helps those who help themselves. Get out there and get your hands dirty solving the problems. Don't wait for the imaginary playmate in the sky to come and make a better world. He's not coming. You can look at the world right now, and realize that's true. If you want a better world, you have to make it happen yourself. You do, absolutely. All right. Let's see. Dan is now in our control room. I should have mentioned that earlier in the hour. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Getting back to the economy here. Apparently, what happened in Cyprus is now being prepared to happen all across Europe and here in the United States of America. They're calling it the bail-in. And they're couching it in terms of the bank's investors will be required to cover the bank's losses. There's a wrinkle in there. To a banker, their depositors are considered investors. And that's why in Cyprus, when they went in with their haircut or their scalping or their castration or whatever you want to call it, they went after depositors in the bank because they're treated as investors who are liable. If they were really going to target the bondholders in the banks, those bondholders would be getting out of the bank as fast as they could. They'd sell their bonds. They'd clear out. What they're talking about is going after the money you have in the bank to cover the bank when it collapses. And they're all starting to collapse despite all this quantitative easing that's out there, just printing the value of the U.S. dollar away. They can't keep it up forever. And at some point, what happened in Cyprus is going to happen all across Europe. It's going to happen here in the United States of America, where the bank is going to say, look, we screwed up, it's a pyramid scheme, it's collapsing, and we're going to grab your money out of your account, we're going to grab whatever is valuable in your safety deposit box, because banks are more important than human beings in our society, and you should just go along with that religious dogma. And that's really all it is. Down in Philadelphia, they've been forced to close 23 schools, lay off thousands of teachers, but they've got money to build a brand new gigantic prison, $400 million prison. No money for education, no money for roads and schools, but by golly, they're building prisons. Probably be run by a private corporation that will use the prison labor to do call centers, whatever, which will, of course, take jobs away from the law-abiding. But it makes money, and that means it's good here. Alrighty, warning message from over at Investment Watch blog, and again, the stock market was just being run up to new heights today by the plunge protection team and the high-frequency traders. It's a warning. When margin debt in the market goes over 2.25% of the gross domestic product, the stock market always crashes. We saw that in 1929, 2000, and 2007. For those of you who don't know what a margin call is, if you are buying and selling stock, you don't have to pay the full cash value. You can put down a down payment, a fraction of the stock's price, and you can get the stock on margin. And the idea is if the stock grows in price and you sell it, you can pay off the margin and go back to playing the game. The problem is, in a major downturn, the stock brokerage will come back and say, there's a margin call. You owe us so much on the stock you purchased. And even though it is now worthless, you still owe us that money. That is what clobbered ordinary Americans in 1929. Because it wasn't just the risk capital. I put $5,000 into the stock market and I lost it. Oh, that's okay. You know, I can survive that. It was, I put $5,000 into the stock market on stocks purchased on margin. And when it all went back, the stock brokerage came back and said, you owe us $50,000. And that they could not survive. We have a dangerously overvalued stock market right now from all this manipulation, plunge protection team, high-frequency trading. And it's partly being run up by margin calls. They're using margin calls to buy larger blocks of stock for the same cash outlay. And this is why the riggers have to keep forcing it up. If it drops, you've got the too-big-to-fail banks are going to collapse. Got all the margin calls are going to hit, going to have all kinds of credit default swaps and derivatives kick in. They have to go on rigging it higher and higher and higher. But you can't keep it up forever. You can only blow a bubble so big before it breaks. And it is coming up there. By the way, for those of you who are fans of Bitcoin and you're having a lot of fun with it, unfortunately the U.S. government is now saying the time has come to tax the Bitcoin, to include it on your income for your income tax, blah, 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 blah. So they're coming after Bitcoin now. We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're coming to the end of the program. A lot of stuff left unsaid. More and more people saying, is there actually any gold left in the private banks that were deposited by other countries, other governments? Does the U.S. government still have the gold that is the property of the American people? Or was it leased out, rehypothecated, sucked into this giant ongoing fraud of Wall Street to literally loot the wealth of the American people and put it into the pockets of the private central bankers and their cronies and minions? It's a question that does need to be asked. That gold that was in Fort Knox is not the property of the United States government. It is the property of the American people. It's your gold, and the government did not have the right to just grab it, lease it to other banks to play games with. We're now getting reports from, this is Investment Watch blog, the demand for physical metal as an investment has reached platinum. There are now platinum shortages out there. And they're still trying to convince you that gold and silver is a bad investment and you should keep your money in that stock market. You should keep your money in the banks. They're lying to you with every single breath. And a good example of this involves Commodity Futures Trading Commission head Gary Gensler, who came out and said it is time for more regulation on Wall Street. Relative to credit default swaps, they are an absolute knife poised at the jugular vein of the American economy. And he came out and said, we have to start regulating these credit default swaps the way we regulate the regular insurance industry. Wall Street said, oh, you can't say that. Look how well things are without regulation, and Obama has apparently fired him now. We don't want anybody in the regulatory agencies who actually want to regulate. We can't have the SEC looking at the stock market. We can't have the Minerals Management Service interfering with those Gulf oil platforms. Those agencies are there only to reassure the American people the government is doing something useful in society. But we can't actually have them out there trying to do their job. You try and do the actual job you were hired to do, you're going to get fired. We hear all these stories about people who are in these very highly paid jobs in these government positions, and they sit in their office all day and listen to music and look at online porn in their taxpayer-funded computers. They're not supposed to actually do the job. They're just a window display so the government can say, yes, we are keeping control of the abuses of Wall Street and the abuses of Deepwater Horizon and the abuses of Monsanto and pharmaceutical companies. And we know for a fact they aren't. So we're coming up here on the end of the show, and we're looking at Floodgate, and we have to keep all of these things alive and not be lulled back into a false sense of security by endless government platitudes. You have a right to be angry. And remember, humans evolved the ability to feel anger and rage for a reason. It is necessary for our survival to power our opposition against those who would harm us and our loved ones. So get angry. Feel that anger. Enjoy. Rejoice in the anger. You deserve it. The government worked hard to make you angry. Go ahead, be angry. We'll be back here tomorrow on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay safe. Stay well. Stay informed. Stay skeptical. Make good choices. And aloha, America.